good bit of changing going on here coming out of week 8. I mean, you got Alabama taking a couple of losses, and that's kind of where we'll start off. And I'm not going to go every single team here in the top 25 because we've got it on your screen, but we'll talk about some of the movers and shakers and what they've got coming up here. But we've got 20 at 25. We've got Alabama, and that's way lower than everybody else in the country is going to have Alabama this week or already has. If you've looked at some rankings that have came out, I guess the AP has came out already today. I don't look at the AP. It's a bunch of I'm sorry, those guys don't even watch the football that we watch. Like, and I say we, like you guys that tune in this channel, those reporters don't watch all the games that we watch every weekend. We know what these teams, how they're doing, and what's going on. And I just those guys throw their vote in, and I just don't think they really give a damn about it. You guys, let me know in the comment section where I'm wrong here or where we're wrong on this top 25. I mean, it's not concrete, obviously. I could see arguments, moving some teams around, obviously. So we'd love to hear from you guys on it. But anyway, at 24, we threw Colorado in there, and I just want to say Mizzou was on the cusp of making this top 25. I mean, Mizzou's only got one loss. The problem is they don't really have a win that you can point at and say that's why they need to be in the top 25. I mean, Alabama has beat Georgia, and we can all say whatever we want to say about that, but Georgia's one of the best teams in the country, and so Alabama therefore has one of the best wins in the country. The problem is they've got losses that are not good, and they've obviously been sputtering. I keep getting sucked back to Alabama, Colorado. Don't look now, but Colorado is really just kind of a snake in the grass there in the Big 12. I mean, they really are. I It's possible, man. It really is possible. This Big 12 just looks pretty bad to me this season. I mean, it looks just teams not meeting expectations at the top rung. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it. Just absolute. Utah has been just. I don't understand what's gone on with Utah this season. I really don't. You move from the Pac-12, which was so tough last year. You go to the Big 12, and it looks like Utah doesn't know what a football looks like. I don't know. Cam Rising's out, probably gone. I don't know. Maybe he comes back next year. Who cares? It's an interesting situation out there, and something that we'll probably discuss more this week. Vandy at 23, Navy, Army rounds out your 25 through 21 there. Illinois, we've got at 20. Illinois' got one loss to Penn State, guys, and as we're going to see as we flip to the next page, Penn State, we obviously at this point in the season, they're undefeated, and they play in the Big Ten. Has Penn State really played like a really, really tough team? I don't know that they have. They played USC. That thing came down to the wire. They beat Illinois 21-7. We're going to see. Penn State's got some tougher games, I guess, coming up. They're going to play Ohio State, which will probably be a pretty tough one there, but we'll see what they're made of. Penn State certainly looks like a playoff team to me. We'll talk about them in a minute. Syracuse, they're at 19. They've got a couple of big games coming up. Not much movement there. SMU, we kind of keep the same. Pitt, undefeated. We kind of kept them in the same areas where we had them. Boise at 16. Boise continues to hang in there and has one of the best losses of anybody, right, to the number one team in the country. By the way, Texas was number one in the AP last week. Why? I don't understand. I said that last week. I'll say it again this week. They shouldn't have been number one. What win did Texas have that was better than Oregon's over Ohio State? Didn't make any sense. Made absolutely no sense. But anyway, Texas A&M at 15. Big game this week, man. We're going to talk about it. They're facing off against number 11 here in our ranking against LSU. It'll be a really, really big test for Texas A&M. We're obviously going to talk about that one in a minute, but Texas A&M, after their loss to Notre Dame, where they have looked really good for the most part, they haven't really played anybody. Missouri, and look, Texas A&M absolutely stomped Missouri's ass. And since that game, I've still been trying to figure out, was that more Missouri's downfall? Was that more Texas A&M playing up to expectations? We saw Missouri struggle again last week. We saw Texas A&M kind of struggle with Mississippi State, couldn't put them away. I was told all week last week how trash Mississippi State is because uh, they 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 scored a bunch of points on Georgia, so everybody wanted to tell me how bad Georgia was going into the Texas game because of the Mississippi State game, and that whole transitive property in college football. You're barking up the wrong tree if that's how you're looking at every situation. Um, Kansas State at 14 looked really good this weekend. Notre Dame 13. They did exactly what they were supposed to do to a wounded duck that was Georgia Tech. BYU at 12. They escaped narrowly this weekend. Somebody's going to get BYU at some point. Um, that was an absolutely amazing football game. Retzlaff has been really impressive, been really clutch. I would say more clutch than impressive, I guess. But BYU is a pretty well-rounded football team, so I think that's why they're able to keep winning these ball games. I don't think they have one area of their game that's just really, really bad. And then LSU at number 11. LSU is blooming. They're a flower that's blooming right now. They're the perfect example of a tale of two seasons. The beginning of the season, LSU did not look very good, guys. It just wasn't looking very good. There was a lot to figure out after Jaden Daniels moves on to the NFL. We see what he's done in the NFL so far, and it makes a lot of sense why he was able to put that offense on his back last year. I think it took a few games to figure out who's going to be can Nuss step up and be a vocal leader? Is he good enough to be able to lead this offense in the right direction? Don't look now. LSU's developing a bit of a run game, at least good enough to be complimentary. And their defense is in position to make plays, whereas they weren't in the last few years. And they're also creating a little bit of havoc behind the line of scrimmage. And that's really changed things for this defense over the last few weeks. Blake Baker is doing a really, really good job there. That was a outstanding hire, and looks like LSU is trending upward right now. I think there's still some flaws in the system, but I thought the most impressive thing this past weekend was LSU's ability to stop the run game by Arkansas, and it's been a big problem for LSU. I don't think they're the most talented team in the world on that defensive line, and especially interior of the defensive line. And they were able to really get a handle on the rush game this weekend. And it's probably the one thing you can point to and say that's probably why they controlled this football game the way that they did. But very impressive win there for LSU, no doubt about it, on the road. What do you think about 25 through 11? Um, Again, I've said it a few weeks in a row now. If you'd have showed me this in the offseason, I would have been like, what? What happened? But this is where we are. And um, there's some really good teams on this list that aren't in our traditional top 25s that we would have imagined in the offseason. What do you think?
Yeah, and I almost wonder how much the new 12 team format of playoffs is changing the way we look at the top 25 because we're opening up the field now to all these teams who are in our top 25 who could still potentially make the college football playoff at this point, whereas in the past you kind of like some of these games might have just been swept under the rug and not really notice as much because now all you got to do is win your conference. So if you're still in your conference race, you're still in it for the playoffs. So at that point, what's the trickle down effect of that when it comes to a top 25? I really like the top 25, Mark. I agree with most of this. For those who don't know, Mark usually sends me his top 25. I create the graphic. I might tweak a few things here and there, but with me working this weekend, I didn't catch as many games as Mark, so I pretty much just left it with what he had on in his top 25 list. But I agree with it mostly. I mean, Alabama at 25. I mean, wow. My have they fallen? They are hanging on by a thread in the top 25 right now. Just barely hanging on because of a Georgia win. But I do think that Alabama is out of the playoff race at this point. They certainly could win out and make it, but with the struggles that they've had over the past 3 weeks, I just don't see it happening, especially as good as LSU is playing right now. Further on down the road, Alabama will have to go to Baton Rouge for that game. Colorado seems to be surprising everyone. We had all written them off at some point this season, at one point or another this season, or maybe before the season even started. But here they are, still contending in the Big 12 and making a run for it here, over halfway through the season. And really impressed with them and that staff. I don't think that there's some national championship contending team. I think that there is a path for them to win the Big 12 if everything falls just right, but nonetheless, they're still in the hunt, so they still kind of make it here. Vandy, we're going to see them get tested. I saw something right before we were on, actually. An Auburn fan sent me a text, and it was a screenshot, and some of you guys may have seen this tweet that went out, but they said that Texas got caught in a trap game because they were looking ahead to Vandy over Georgia. and I just thought that was hilarious because Vanderbilt seems like a little bit of a sleeping giant or something over there, and that just makes a ton of sense. So watch out, Texas.
What world are we living in? What the heck?
That's right. But we saw what happened when Alabama played Georgia and then had to play Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt. So Texas better watch out. Especially I would definitely say that if they beat Georgia and then have to go play at Vandy, I don't think anybody's going to catch Vandy sleeping this year. They're a pretty tough team. So I think that Texas will give them their best shot. But Vandy, the top 25 was fun while it lasted. Can you give us some magic one more week and pull off another upset? Speaking of big upsets, if Navy can get it done against Notre Dame, my gosh, what an upset that would be. They're a really good program. I think that Notre Dame in this game is going to be favored by 11.5, if I'm not mistaken. So Vegas seems to think this is going to be a pretty close game in comparison to years past. Maybe Navy can stay in this one. I think that they've got the roster to do it. Army, much the same, but and similarly, we're probably not going to see Army tested until they face Notre Dame. Can one of those two Service Academy teams take down Notre Dame? I think the potential is there, but that's a really good defense that you're going to have to run that triple option on in order to get that done. We'll have to wait and see. Not going to go through all of these here. I think, just picking, kind of cherry picking here. I thought SMU had another really impressive outing this week. Once again, they're looking like a dark, not a dark horse, but a dark Mustang now in the ACC. I feel like SMU really has a chance to upset more teams along the way in just their first season in the Power Four in a long time, and really in a ACC race that's wide open. I think that those Mustangs are looking pretty good right now. Boise State had the bye. They're still my pick to sneak into the or get into, not really sneak in, but get into the playoffs and get that at-large bid there. I really, there's just not much to say other than Ashton Genty and a pretty tough defense. I really like that combination there. They play complementary football as good as any team in the country, I think. Texas A&M and LSU. It's a matchup we're going to talk about here soon, but this is going to decide a lot of things this week. That this game is going to be massive as far as implications go. Looks like it's going to be a night game at Kyle Field. Can't wait to break it down with you here in just a few minutes, Mark. But both of these teams are very much deserving to be here. I said last night, but LSU looks like Ohio State circa 2022 when they finally got a defensive coordinator that kind of knew what he was doing and, really just elevated the defense to match an offense that has been very proficient for the past few seasons. That defense is looking for real now. I'm anxious to see what they do moving forward. I'm with you. I think BYU is going to get got at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas State also drops another one in the Big 12, considering the parity that's in that conference and some opponents that are kind of stepping up and putting themselves in a national spotlight like Iowa State. I think that Iowa State's got Kansas State and Utah at the end of the season, if I'm not mistaken. So really an opportunity for them to supplant themselves as the front runner in the Big 12 a little bit later on.
Absolutely. All right, let's go 10 through 6 right quick. We've got Texas at number 10, right below Indiana, at number 9. Look, Texas, we talked about it all week last week, and then I heard some people talk about it a little bit Saturday, kind of in the pregame shows and things like that. But Texas had not played anybody this year, guys, and we talked about it on this channel, and it was a big risk, taking Texas and those points. I talked about Vegas was setting a trap last week, and look, I went and listened to Steve Sarkisian's post-game press conference. He gave absolutely no credit to Georgia. I mean, very, very little, very little. He said a couple of times that that's a pretty good team we played over there, but it was all, according to Sark, it was all self-imposed issues. It was all Texas's fault that they lost that game. And look, I mean, maybe there's some truth to that. I mean, they did turn the ball over a bunch, but look, Texas has got to prove themselves. Okay, they were the little spoiled brat of the Big 12. They always got everybody's, everybody thought they were the kings of the castle, a king of the castle. Not anymore. You're in a much larger castle, and there's already kings here. So you're going to have to slay a king before you can be one. And Texas hasn't proved that. I mean, they haven't won anything since 2009. They won a Big 12 championship last year over Oklahoma State. So, I mean, we say what we want to say, and we can talk about the projection and what we thought Texas would be, blah, blah, blah. They haven't showed it. They ran the ball for 20-something yards last week. It was something we talked about in the preseason. We said, well, maybe they've fixed it. They haven't fixed it. And you're not going to win playoff games running the ball for 20-something yards. So, I don't know. It was an interesting situation yesterday. And just a complete 180 for the Texas fan base after that football game. I knew talked to some people this morning that were at the game in Austin last night, and they said there was just people just absolutely crying at that game yesterday. Pretty hilarious stuff. Anyway, number 9, Indiana. This team's really impressive. If you didn't know about Indiana, you know about them now. They absolutely just donkey punched Nebraska. I mean, I look, we talked about it on the show. We had kind of like a catchy title on our prediction from last week, and it caught a lot of attention, some of it negative from the Nebraska fan base, but we couldn't have looked any more genius than after that game, because Indiana was not just better in one phase of the game, they whooped their ass in 3 phases of the game, and now Nebraska has got to go to Ohio State. We're going to, we'll talk about Ohio State in a second, but that spread is large, and Nebraska's at 5 wins. We talked about it last night. What does this mean? They get stuck at 5. They might be waiting a little bit for that 6th win. 8, Tennessee. Maybe this past weekend and that second half for Tennessee was something that kind of helped them turn the corner. Sometimes when you go through really rough situations and you come out the other end with a W, you've got something to coach, but at the same time you got the W, and you kind of, I guess, kind of put restless fans at bay a little bit. The Tennessee offense figured out how to get it done in the second half. The Tennessee defense is what we thought they were. I think the secondary is maybe a little better than what I thought they were. I'm a true believer in this Tennessee defense, and they're going to be in every single football game. And it's going to come down to Nico hitting 2 or 3 plays a game and stretching the defense out. I mean, that's really the secret sauce for Tennessee at this point. I think they've got all the other pieces. I don't think Tennessee – I love the run game for Tennessee. Let me say that. Dylan Sampson is the man. I really like Dylan Sampson. God forbid something happened to that guy. I mean, because there's really nobody behind him, it doesn't seem like. I'm just being honest. I mean, I know there's guys, but nobody like Dylan Sampson. Got to keep him healthy. He is the catalyst of that offense right now. And like I said, Nico's got to hit a couple plays a game, stretch a defense out, and I think it'll go a long way in helping Tennessee. And with the offensive coach like Heupel, you would think that as the season goes on, he's going to be able to make adjustments and the offense is going to get slightly better. And like I said, I think in the second half of that game, I think they did play a lot better, which wasn't hard because of the first half of that game. Tennessee played like complete butt. But the defense was able to keep them in it. Like I said, Clemson, number 7. Clemson continues to look better every single week. The offense looks a lot better. Finally, Garrett Riley's, I think his vision and his system is finally starting to take effect. And it took a while and it took some patience. And, much to the chagrin of college football nation, I think a lot of fans, everybody's super impatient, right? Everybody wants it here, wants it now. It's taken just a minute for Clemson to figure that out offensively. And I think they are figuring it out. Now, have they played a murderer's row of opponents? No. The only concern I see with Clemson at this point is I don't think they're very deep defensively. Every time we see the second or third string come in, it's like they give up 30 points every time. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on with Clemson. And they're going to play some of their biggest games towards the end of the year. So we'll definitely keep an eye on Clemson as they were able to defeat Virginia this past week. Iowa State squeaks by UCF. Apparently some kind of miracle plays there in that game. Still, this is one I got to go back and watch. It didn't have my direct attention. It was UCF and Iowa State. I'm sorry. There was other stuff on. I'm not dedicating a TV to that game. I'll have to go back and watch it. And Iowa State, it's just kind of sit and wait. Let's wait till the end of the season when they actually play somebody and really see what they're made of. UCF is pretty sorry, man. And to be struggling with them, I mean, it's not really a good sign necessarily. What do you think about 6 through 10?
Well, starting off where you left off with Iowa State, my understanding in that game was that it took a lot for them to win at the end. There were some miracle plays. Double O'Neill in the chat saying that they were saved by the ref the last series of the game. I totally get all that, but based on some of the highlights that I saw early in the game, there were a lot of plays that UCF made on defense, some turnovers and things like that. It looked like a really messy game by the Iowa State offense, and I think if they clean that up, they get back to their sort of dominant ways there in the Big 12. I still feel pretty good about them winning the Big 12 at this point. Clemson, speaking of conference races, I would be really surprised if we don't see a Clemson and Miami ACC championship game at this point. They really seem like the two teams that are just a little, I don't want to say head and shoulders above the rest because they could definitely drop a game. We especially Miami, which we'll get to in just a minute. But I did want to ask you, Mark, do you think with Clemson's offense, the way that they're clicking right now, as a play caller, would you rather have Lincoln Riley or Garrett Riley? I think we forget that they're brothers. Like that doesn't get talked about a lot, until Clemson plays in a playoff game or something like that. But I feel like Garrett Riley's calling a better system right now, and probably with less weapons, especially on the perimeters. So
yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, like I said, Garrett he's been underwhelming to this point, and now this year it looks like things are coming to fruition. It's hard to say right now. The ACC is they're so bad. I mean, that conference is just god awful, So it's hard. It seems like it's hard to gauge what Clemson would be able to do out of the conference, And I know we're talking about coordinators here, but I do agree that Riley is obviously making the Garrett Riley is making a lot of changes there at Clemson, and they're for the good. That would be pretty cool to see them match up in a playoff game, brothers against brother. But as we know, USC is not sniffing a playoff this season. But
won't see that this year. While you were talking about Garrett Riley, it just had me thinking there for a minute. But moving on, Tennessee at 8. Huge win over Alabama. No matter what year it is, that's a big win to win the third Saturday in October. Shame on the Tennessee fans for storming the field. I said it last night, but come on, guys. You're number 11. You just beat the number 7 team. Like, it's not that big of an upset. Don't storm the field. Save your goalpost. Like, like we don't. They're an endangered species. We can't be just tearing down goalposts.
Did they tear them down?
Oh yeah, they tore it down. This one got got confiscated, I guess, by security. It didn't make it out of the stadium, but somebody had some wits about
y'all get
them.
ready. Tennessee will be putting up a GoFundMe account this week.
I know, right?
You know,
yeah,
I'm dead serious. Well, that's how they do. I mean, and that shit's ridiculous, but that's how they do, man.
Yep. But at least somebody had some wits about them in that stadium to say, like, hey guys, we shouldn't be doing this. Like, come on, like, get it together. We can't be doing this every other year.
Did you see the comment from the on that last night? Somebody commented on the live show after we had already got off from being live, and they said that the recruits and parents were the first ones over the wall. I don't know. I didn't watch it, but I didn't watch the end of the game. I didn't watch all that stuff. I mean, it wasn't worth.
Probably a bit of an exaggeration. I have a hard time believing that they would beat the student section, but they probably joined in. I mean, who wouldn't at that point? Hell, as a Georgia fan, I would have been on the field grabbing some grass. As soon as somebody breaks the seal there. I mean,
dude, it's not going to be long now, and they're going to have these football stadiums set up like hockey, where there's like plexiglass around the edges of the top of the stadium, of the top of the the bowl there, and they're going to make it to where you can't climb over that thing because I mean, eventually somebody's going to die when this happens. I mean, I hate to be morbid or whatever, but and get off track, but eventually somebody's going to get trampled to death out there. I mean, we saw Alabama's wide receiver punch a girl a couple years ago, and I'm surprised there wasn't more made of it, then. But not a good idea, and I'm glad we never have to worry about that as Georgia fans. Georgia Bulldogs fans will never storm the field. It will never happen. No. It just will never happen.
They have a like a bush moat going around the field. Like it'd be tough to get through those bushes.
Got to get through the hedges. Yep.
Got to get through the hedges, man. All right, Indiana absolutely bludgeoned Nebraska. We'll pick back up with them against Ohio State, I guess. I mean, outside of Ohio State, like I took a look at their schedule. I don't see them losing another game outside of Ohio State, which says a lot about Indiana. I don't mean to downplay them because they have a terrible schedule, but with the way that they're playing and I mean, apparently it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback either. This system is just set up for success. I am interested to hear what Curtis Rourke's status is moving forward after that hand injury. I surely hope he's fine, at least by the Ohio State game, because I do feel like they are going to need him down the road for sure. But Indiana is a very, very good team. And then Texas obviously loses to Georgia and, gets bumped down a pretty good bit. I feel like obviously Texas is much better than really any team on this list. I think that they could easily be 6 or 5 or 4 from a power rating standpoint, but this is a ranking, y'all. Like, who has Texas beat? That's the big question. Like, I know that they lost to Georgia, so did Clemson, but Clemson has looked much better in their ACC scheduling and all that. So I feel like a lot of these are transferable, places here, and for a lot of the top 25 they are. But at this point, I feel like we just need to see Texas continue to stack wins. I think a win over Vanderbilt is actually a pretty decent notch on the belt at this point with the way Vanderbilt's playing. Yeah, I would agree, especially depending on how you do it. They got to go to Vanderbilt, which Nick Saban would tell you is the easiest place to play in the SEC. But I still think that would be a pretty good win for them. But yeah, that's all I got on 6 through 10.
It's going to be interesting to see how Texas responds to an emotional loss. I'm really interested to see how that team responds after that, especially after their coach really wasn't really accepting the loss, which didn't really make a lot of sense to me. I mean, it couldn't have been more clear who was the better team this past Saturday. I mean, it couldn't have been more clear. I don't know. Texas hasn't beat anybody. So, number 5, speaking of teams that haven't beat anybody, Ohio State. Ohio State's going to get a chance to play Indiana. They're going to get a chance to play Penn State, and those are two really quality opponents. Um, they haven't. Ohio State played one quality opponent and they lost. It was a really close game. That's a really good loss, and that's why Ohio State's where they're at. I mean, we're looking for good wins and good losses here, and comparing them to one another. That's all we can do. I try to leave preconceived notions out of this. I think Ohio State's a pretty doggone good team, but we're still going to have to wait a little longer to see how good they really are. Miami at number 4. Miami likes to play with fire. And eventually, when you play with fire, you will get burned. And I don't know when it's going to come. It might be against Clemson. Clemson in Miami, that might be a 52-49 football game. You know, I think that's going to be a really, really high scoring one there. I can't wait to see it if we can get to that point in Charlotte. But Miami defensively is just not as good as what we thought they were going to be. I think offensively they are as advertised. Although I will say the running game hasn't been as good as what I thought it was, at least with Damian Martinez as far as him. Mark Fletcher seems to kind of be more of the guy in that offense for whatever reason. But I think Miami's got potential to beat anyone. But defensively, I wonder if they've got a defense good enough to win a championship. Penn State is the complete opposite. Penn State is using every resource at hand to figure out a way to generate offense week in and week out. And kudos because they've been successful doing that. And I would say in some cases more successful than last season. But we can also ask from Penn State, what's their most quality win? What's their highest quality win at this point? You'd have to say Illinois, you know. And Illinois's got some pretty serious flaws, on their team. We're going to talk about Illinois here in a minute. Georgia at number 2. Um, I had to really kind of think about putting them over Miami and Penn State, but look, guys, I got eyeballs. I mean, and Georgia's loss, to Alabama. It was on the road at Alabama. And that was at a time when I felt like Alabama was playing a little bit better football, especially in the first half of that game. Georgia broke Alabama. Something got broken in that football game because from the second half of that football game, Alabama has been playing a pretty bad brand of football since then. From what we saw in the first half of the Georgia game versus what we saw since the last, I guess you could say, 14 quarters of football for Alabama, it's been totally different. So I still think that's a quality loss for Georgia on the road at Bama. And Georgia's got one of the best wins of the year, and has been in some pretty good football games this season. I mean, there's not a more battle tested team in the top 5. You could maybe argue Oregon, kind of, but I don't think you can truly argue that. I mean, Oregon's definitely played an easier schedule than Georgia this season. So, with Georgia having a loss, I realize that maybe this is a little controversial having them all the way up at number 2, but I have eyeballs. I've seen what I've seen. If Georgia's defense can replicate what they did, I don't think there's anybody in the country that can beat them, Mason. I'm just going to be honest with you. Especially if the offense can figure out a way to just not turn the freaking ball over. The Georgia offense, I would have never thought it would have been the drag for this team, but right now they're kind of soul searching. It was the best game we've seen the Georgia offensive line play all year, though. I still 100% believe that. That was the best game we've seen the Georgia offensive line play all season. We saw some semblance of Georgia being able to run the football early in that game. We haven't seen that all season. So, whereas the weakness for Georgia right now is offense and kind of trying to work through some things, I think Georgia's kind of turning a page there too. It seemed like we turned the page on the defense maybe this past weekend, getting some guys back healthy. And I think the offense is starting to figure some things out. Offensive line was a big issue to start the season. It looks a lot better right now than what it did earlier. Let's see if Georgia can work out some of the communication issues with between these wide receivers and Carson Beck and figure out a way to simplify their relationship because you do kind of see that on the field right now. Oregon, number 1. Oregon should have been number 1 last week. Oregon, I've yet to hear an answer from anybody that makes any sense about why Texas was number 1 over Oregon. It didn't make any sense, guys. There's no good reason for that. Texas had played no one. Oregon has played a much tougher schedule and is undefeated. It doesn't make any sense why Texas would have been over Oregon. I haven't heard one good answer for that. We're going to talk some Oregon football. They're going against Illinois this weekend. What do you think about the top 5, Mason?
Yeah, I think you got it right. Looking at Oregon, you could argue that the Ohio State win was better than Georgia's win over Texas, but remember that game was played at home for Oregon. They had the benefit of playing in front of their home field and in front of their home fans. So I would say that Georgia's win over Texas was a bigger win overall. But I could definitely hear the argument. So I agree. Even though Georgia has one loss, I feel like their win is just really propels them above the other undefeated teams. And then you look at the one loss that they had, and it was extremely close. And Georgia really should have won that game, I guess, at the end when it comes down to it. Penn State undefeated still. We'll see. I mean, this is another team that we're just kind of waiting until they face Ohio State to see what they're really made of. And credit Ohio State because, I mean, now all of a sudden it seems like they've got a decent schedule where they at least have 3 games that are, losable. And I'm including Oregon in that, which they did lose, but Penn State and Indiana are the other 2. And yeah, and we'll have to wait and see on those 2 teams. The Big Ten is just kind of very top heavy this season, and it's a bit of a shame. I'm not hearing I don't want to hear the Big Ten's better than the SEC this year or anything like that. SEC is just more balanced overall. Any given week is kind of the mantra this year for the SEC, and when you're beating up on in-conference teams or you're getting beat by a team within your conference, that means that the conference is good. It doesn't mean it's bad. So I don't understand this whole talk about the SEC is down. I understand there are no truly elite teams, but that can be said across the board. Like, Oregon's not truly elite. We've seen them struggle in games that they shouldn't be struggling in. Ohio State got beat by that Oregon team. So, miss me with the whole SEC is down, Big Ten is up a bit, because that's just not the case. I mean, we saw last year, Big Ten won the national championship. They could very well do it again this year, but that does not mean that they're a better conference than the SEC. And I'm not traditionally a SEC homer or anything like that. I'm just calling it like I see it. I mean, this is a really competitive conference with NFL talent on every single team in the SEC this year, and that's why they're a competitive conference. Miami, speaking of not competitive conferences, Miami looks like they are headed to the ACC championship game, but they're going to win every game from here on out by 1 score only. They are the most entertaining team to watch in football, but they don't win by much. They're not the best team to watch. They're not the best team in general. But if you want to watch good football and good competitive games, go watch a Miami game because they're very fun to watch. I don't know if anybody can stop that, that offense for Miami, that Hurricane offense. And I don't know if anybody can stop Cam Ward. I think he's playing like one of, if not the best, quarterback in the country right now. I mean, he looks absolutely electric, absolutely lights out, and he's very fun to watch. And I kind of already talked about Ohio State. I don't think I need to spend any more time on them. They've got their test coming up, but for now, I think they're a top 5 team and potentially even one of the top 3 teams as far as a power ranking goes. But for now, in this power ranking, I like them. I like them at 5 for now.